I have a book recommendation for you this month that might surprise you. It is definitely outside of my preferred genre of memoir, sort of, but much of it is autobiographical, just in a different form. Plus, I have some history with this author, which makes recommending his book that much better. So let's dive in. Hi, my name is Patricia Charpentier, and welcome to episode 115 of the Life Writers Vlog, where you can find inspiration and useful tips to help you write your life stories. I first took a workshop with this poet 10 or more years ago, and I was amazed and humbled by his beautiful work. As most of you know, I am not a poet. But what drew me to Richard Blanco's workshop and talk was his memoir. It's called The Prince of Los Cucuyos, a Miami Childhood. And cucuyos means fireflies or glowflies or fire beetles in English. What I want to focus on now is Blanco's poetry. Now, poetry is like opera to me. I respect the talent and the training it takes to do it, but both are not works I respond well to. I mostly kind of avoid them altogether. Most poetry goes right over my head, and opera is just something I don't get. I have exposed myself to both, but that's just not how I'm wired. I know both of these statements will likely cause a negative reaction in many of you. I get it. Convince me why I should love one or the other. Richard Blanco has a list of accolades that goes on forever. Most notably, he was the 5th inaugural poet in U.S. history when he read One Today at President Barack Obama's 2nd inauguration. He was the first immigrant, the first Latino, the first openly gay person, and at that time, the youngest person to receive this honor. I'll add a link to the vlog notes so you can hear him read this amazing poem. In 2023, President Joe Biden awarded Blanco the National Humanities Medal. About Blanco, Biden said, an engineer, poet, Cuban American. His poetry bridges cultures and languages, a mosaic of our past, our present, and our future, reflecting a nation that is hectic, colorful, and still becoming. And yes, Blanco was a civil engineer for a long time. It was a job he loved and only reluctantly gave up when he became a full-time poet and professor. Blanco says his passion is to demystify poetry teaching to all ages, including grade school to nursing homes, correctional facilities, and at many different types of writers' workshops. That's how this unlikely candidate ended up in one of his workshops more than 10 years ago. That afternoon, Blanco used one of his poems, Looking for the Gulf Motel, and focused on showing, not telling, and the use of sensual detail to paint his amazing scene. He used several other devices to make his poem so effective. Repetition was one. What should be but isn't was another. In October, Richard Blanco was the keynote speaker for this year's Florida Writers Association conference. I talked to him for a good bit and told him about the impact his workshop and his poem had on me way back when, and that I still had the notes I took. And just how much I loved reading his memoir. It's one I will probably teach someday. Blanco is so personable and funny, just a regular guy with an amazing talent who loves to share it with people. I sat at the very front of his keynote address as he told stories about many of his autobiographical poems, showed related pictures on the screen, and read his work. Hearing him read made me laugh hysterically at times and brought me to tears at others. I laughed and cried my way through his entire talk. I may come to love poetry if I could have Richard Blanco sit there and read it to me. His latest book is called Homeland of My Body. Homeland of My Body. New and selected poems. And it includes some prose poems, standard poetry, including Looking for the Gulf Motel, Queer Theory, according to my grandmother, which is so funny, America, a funny poem about how a Cuban family learned about and came to celebrate Thanksgiving. Again, I may come to love poetry if I keep reading Richard Blanco. I guess that's a start. We can certainly learn to improve our writing by reading and studying poetry, how to choose the right words, add imagery, include sensory detail, experiment with simile and metaphor, and more. Reading poetry just might be a worthy investment of our time on many different levels. So tell us about the position of poetry in your life. Do you read poetry? If so, what do you like about it? What do you gain from reading poetry? Do you write poetry? What makes you decide to write something as a poem rather than a story? Is the poetry you write autobiographical, based on your experiences? Or, like me, does picking up a book of poetry never sound like a good idea? Why are you not attracted to poetry? Have you ever tried to write a poem? In my master's program, I had to study poetry and write at least one poem. I chose a highly descriptive passage of prose I wrote and took out all the extra words. It wasn't pretty, but it got me through the class. Tell us about the role poetry plays in your life. But whether you're a poet or not, remember, the only way to do this wrong is to not do it at all. The only way to do this wrong is to not do it at all. Until next time, happy writing, everybody.
Don't miss the next episode. Sign up to be notified of future posts and upcoming events. Use the buttons below to share this episode on social media or with a friend who might like it. If you enjoyed this week's episode, you will love our Life Writers membership. Whether you don't know where to start writing your life stories, have started and stopped many times, or have been writing but want to receive feedback to make your stories better, the Life Writers membership is where you need to be. We have a Get Started roadmap, an extensive library of instructional videos, live events via Zoom, and a supportive and active community. If you want to take the stories that live in your heart and mind and put them into words on the page, check out Life Writers at lifewriters.us.